I'll go first since mine is the best.
These are my favorite albums from 20 different metal subgenres, starting with thrash metal. We have Metallica with Ride the Lightning. Now, I could have gone with Master of Puppets, but I decided to go with the more pure representation and absolute banger of a just thrash record. Fight Fire with Fire is an incredible opener, followed by the excellent title track, an iconic For Whom the Bell Tolls, Riff City, what an amazing hook. Then we get their first power ballad in Fade to Black, closing out side 1, only to kick the adrenaline up again for side 2 with Trapped Under Ice. Then Escape and another legendary thrash track with Creeping Death, and putting a bow on the whole thing with the Call of Cthulhu instrumental. 8 tracks, 47 minutes, absolute perfection. And by the way, y'all, making this list was agonizing. It was really hard for me to parse through what is actually the best, in my opinion, for each of these genres. And ultimately, if I had kept really digging into that, this video never would have come out. So finally, I just decided what's the first album that just kind of comes to mind? And so that's the criteria I went with for most of these. So next up we have groove metal, and I went with Pantera with Vulgar Display of Power. This is my personal favorite pick from this band, and you could go with plenty of things from this time, including things like Overkill, but I feel like even though those two bands were sort of influencing each other around this time, this is the one that really set the tone. Regardless, for me, this takes everything that Cowboys did and does it even better, and ultimately became the blueprint for most bands to this day. Mouth for War, A New Level, and of course Walk are all absolute anthems of the groove metal genre, and written so infectiously that you couldn't avoid them on even mainstream radio. Then of course you've got the serious gym fuel of Fucking Hostile and the deeply bitter This Love. For someone looking to get started in groove metal, I'd say this is the one. For death metal, I went with Death with Individual Thought Patterns. One of their best lineups of all time here, if you ask me, with, of course, Chuck with Andy LaRocque on guitar, Steve DiGiorgio on fretless bass, and Gene freaking Hoglan on drums. Yes, I said his name correctly this time. To me, this feels like the perfect melding of the speed, intensity, and personality of their early albums with the more technical and melodic elements of Human. So many killer songs here, like Mentally Blind, In Human Form, Nothing Is Everything, and The Philosopher. I had to go with an album from the genre's namesake, and this is my favorite from them. For melodic death metal, I went with Dark Tranquillity with Damage Done. Now, I've lost count of how many videos I've brought this one up in at this point, but even after all these years, I consider it to be the pinnacle of what Gothenburg Melodeath has to offer. There are so many great options here, from At the Gates and In Flames to Carcass, and albums that are kind of a little bit more from the forefront of the building of the genre, but this is my favorite to just put on and hum every single note. The entire album is pure earworm hook bliss, and another with some incredible atmosphere as well. Final Resistance, Cathode Ray Sunshine, The Enemy, every song is single-worthy. For Blackened death metal, we have Behemoth with The Satanist. I thought the vengeance God pouring forth the snake. A record that continues to incite either cheers or groans every time I mention it, but I really do feel like Behemoth are the pinnacle of this genre, and this is the most fully they have distributed both qualities. They really made a statement with this record in a way that resonated across the entire metal community and led it to topping many lists for not only that year, but the entire decade. Amazing riffs, and also more of that kind of dramatic sort of stage performance vibe to the vocals. Some again would call it overrated, and that's fine, but I genuinely consider it to be one of the most important metal albums of the last 20 years. For black metal, we have Emperor with In the Nightside Eclipse. I'm not sure how often the first crack at a particular sound ends up enduring as deeply as this one does, but I think that this album makes a strong case when it comes to symphonic black metal. And as much as I'd like to choose an enslaved record for this slot, I'd still say that this is the best black metal debut and my favorite that is most representative of the early era. such incredible atmosphere and especially impressive in a time where most of their peers were going for a more raw and minimalist sound. Not even necessarily going for, that's just like what they had at the time. Start to finish masterpiece though, this is at once very much a product of the time, but still incredibly forward-thinking and timeless as a result. For nu metal, we have Slipknot with Slipknot. Now, I consider myself fortunate that my first metal album I listened to from start to finish was also one that I still consider to be a true monument, one of my favorites just overall, and man did it blow my mind from the moment I pressed play on Sick on my Discman so many years ago. You've got classics like Eyeless, Spit It Out, Liberate, Surfacing, and some mainstream radio play with Wait and Bleed. And then you've got more atmospheric stuff like Tattered and Torn, Frail Limb Nursery, Prosthetics, and Scissors, which are just as important to its overall vibe. And yeah, it still holds strong. There are plenty of other albums I could think of for this slot too, but this is the top for me. For doom metal, we have Black Sabbath with Paranoid. Can you help me? Kind of a basic bitch pick here, as it was named #1 metal of all time by Rolling Stone and has like some of their most well-known songs on it, obviously. Opening on my personal favorite in War Pigs, which is just like a perfect song from the composition to the sheer attitude in the performances. And then you have the driving palm mutes of Paranoid, which the band says was basically a happy accident of an afterthought, and more classic doom riffing of Iron Man and Electric Funeral. But yeah, it's an enduring classic for a reason, and as somebody who's not even a big doom fan, like I very much enjoy this one, and Masters of Reality. For power metal, we have Rhapsody of Fire with Legendary Tales. Now, I'm not a big power metal guy either, but going through the debuts for the tier list, this Italian band and Angra really stood out to me. Maybe the best album opener on that list too, with the monk-like chanting and organ intro going into Warrior of Ice. Powerful vocals that many trace back to the likes of Dio, just lush, melodious instrumentation, often inspired by neoclassical and folk music, big atmosphere broadened by keys, synth, and other instruments, fantasy-inspired lyrics and imagery, it's all there. The level of production and orchestration on this album really captures the full spirit and best elements of the genre, in my opinion. For heavy metal, we have Judas Priest with Screaming for Vengeance. Now, it was really a toss-up between this and Number of the Beast, but I feel like I go back to this one more. The guitar tone, those big wailing harmonized leads, Rob just killing it with anthemic vocal line after vocal line. Hooks upon hooks upon hooks, incredible kickoff with the Hellion going into the ripping Electric Eye, and then there's that incredibly infectious riff on Riding on the Wind and the more plotting but no less catchy Bloodstone. One of their best albums and an easy must listen for heavy metal. For symphonic metal, I went with Nightwish with Once. Not the biggest symphonic metal guy either, but going through this and the Epica discographies were both quite a treat. And they really stepped up the production quality with the orchestra and choir on this one for an absolutely massive sound. I could really talk about how every song is incredible, but I'll just leave it at 10-minute epic Ghost Love score. Truly incredible performances all around that even this guy who generally just wants things as heavy as possible can appreciate. For progressive metal, I went with Opeth with Blackwater Park. So many different directions I could have gone with this one, from a more pure direction of something like Dream Theater, and I also considered Mastodon with Crack the Sky, but this was the album that really stuck in my mind, and personally I think it's worthy of every bit of the hype that it gets. From the opening notes of The Leper Affinity to the closing melodies of the title track, it is truly perfection. And yeah, you can argue it's more death metal than progressive maybe, but that's why this is my list, and you can make your own down in the comments. For metalcore, I went with Converge with Jane Doe. Again, so many records I could have gone with, but Converge helped to write the playbook, and this album in particular is basically like the Reign in Blood of the genre. People still rock this album art on the daily, and in another consistent discography filled with 9s, this just happens to be the most important 10 overall. Absolute rager of a record that really captures what it feels like when you're in the genuine, unbridled emotions of a relationship catastrophically imploding. And with some Kurt Ballou riffs that still get stuck in my head regularly with the likes of Concubine, Distance and Meaning, and Fault and Fracture, just to name a few. For Mathcore, we have the number 12 Looks Like You with Worse Than Alone. I'm sure most expected The Dillinger Escape Plan record, and honestly, so did I when I first started thinking about this, but when it came down to it, I just had to go with this one instead. It kept coming up for me. Not only are they every bit as talented as the band in their original run, this album is still probably one of my top 10 records just of all time. I challenge you to find a more diverse and eclectic release in Mathcore, mixing abrasive technical noise, jazz, death metal, and Latin music, and all somehow flowing together seamlessly for a final runtime that is much more than the sum of its parts. For Deathcore, we have Suicide Silence with The Cleansing. This is very much a big forerunner album for the genre. Like, it's far from the first Deathcore album, but along with Whitechapel's debut, this is definitely a big benchmark release that helped to launch the genre to a bigger audience and sort of set, again, the blueprint moving forwards. Mitch's variety in the vocals really adds to the texture of the songs, and his delivery always gets me screaming along. He was always great with the one-liners, too, like on Pity for a Coward. The drumming on this album is also quite good, especially on tracks like The Price of Beauty. Love that pingy dodgeball snare tone. Super brutal and aggressive, and it became one of the best-selling debut albums in Century Media's history. For post-metal, I have Godflesh with Pure. Cheating a bit by including this band more known for its industrial metal sound, but this was a big release in post-metal as well. If Street Cleaner was a slog through underground sewage, this is a bleak trek through the cold steel and concrete of a graffiti-splattered cityscape. The best way I can put it is that their music kind of massages your brainstem, like it really taps into that reptilian part. Great songs here that really carry a length that would otherwise be cumbersome, with lots to take on stylistically. For Sludge, I went with High on Fire with De Vermis Mysteris. Considered Mastodon again for this one, but I landed here instead. Produced by Converge's Kurt Ballou, giving the mix such a full sound with so much presence to each instrument and an extra punch to the drums. An awesome drum intro going into Serums of Liao, another great way to kick off a record. Followed by another banger in Bloody Knuckles, and then ripping, tearing Fertile Green with more fantastic drums. This is High on Fire, truly firing on all cylinders for every single track. For industrial, I went with Skinny Puppy with Too Dark Park. This album was recorded in my old stomping grounds of Chicago, Illinois, and I feel like that atmosphere seeps its way into this record very much so. To this day, this is one of the darkest records I've ever heard. The first time I pressed play on Convulsion, my teenage brain did not know what to make of it, but I knew that I wanted more.
He's seeing monsters. He's losing his mind, and he feels it going.
Just chilling, eerie stuff mixing hypnotic beats, horror movie samples, and lyrics centered around environmentalism and protection of animals. Every single track here is incredible, thanks in part to Kevin and Dwayne's incredible earworm synth hooks. It's my favorite from them overall. For Grindcore, I went with Pig Destroyer with Terrifier. To me, it really couldn't be any album but this one. I think Grind, and this is the band I think of first. Like, Napalm Death is also a band I enjoy many albums from, the more direct to the experimental, but this album cover instantly pops into my head first.
I bet it does. I bet it does.
Just a straight ripper with no reprieve and no remorse for 33 minutes straight. J.R. Hayes has one of the most demented voices around, and he and his band really put it all on the line for this one. And for folk metal, I went with Ensephirum with Ensephirum. Beginning their career with Yari fronting, now arguably more known for his Winter Sun project, and both his guitar work and vocals shine strong here with some of his best work in my opinion. Pretty much every song on here is single-worthy, Hero in a Dream, Token of Time, and Guardians of Fate among them. Also, Little Dreamer, Battle Song with that great bass line and use of organ, and Wind Rider is another personal favorite of mine with more headbang-worthy riffs. If someone is looking for a place to start with this band, or with folk metal in general, I always bring this album up first. Y'all check out this playlist for more album lists, or this video for your personal YouTube recommendation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.